We're both big fans of your forgeries.
Just don't ask me to make you a fake ID.
Yeah.
That's a question for the show. Oh, now that you brought that up. I think
Trace will just lead it off with the.
Yeah, okay. The amazing new Westport Library and iTunes proudly presents Oh Brother, Not Another Podcast with me, Trace Burroughs.
And me, Miggs Burroughs. And I'll hand it back to Trace to do the introductions.
Yep. And today we have with us Ross MacDonald, who has a very unique and interesting biography. First, he's created tens of thousands of props for motion pictures and television going back 25 years. We'll discuss that after the intro. He's a prolific illustrator, children's book illustrator. I don't know if you write those books too. We'll talk about that. Yeah. Product design and comic design. Did I leave anything out?
No, I don't think so. I think that covered it all. I used to be an egg candler, but I let that fall by the wayside.
A what? An egg what?
Egg candler.
I don't even, okay.
That was one of my first jobs when I was in high school. I was working on a mom and pop chicken farm, and the least gross job I had on that was you hold eggs up to a light just to make sure that if the yolks have sunk down, they're too old to sell.
Oh, well.
I don't even know if they do that anymore, but.
So unfortunately, this is just an audio podcast and people can't see the awesome props you've made. But if they go to your website, Macdonald.com, they can see some of those props and they're amazing. It's probably something that a lot of people who watch movies never think about, like when those props pass their eyes. It could be for a few moments, seconds, minutes. They just take it for granted. They don't think about the details behind making a motion picture. So I have a question to start off with. How did you get into this? What was your first paper prop that you were asked to do?
Well, the first thing I did for a major motion picture was a faux 1930s children's book for Baby's Day Out, which was made back in 1993. It's a John Hughes movie. And the plot revolves around a baby that gets kidnapped, and his favorite book is about a baby's trip to the big city. And the kidnappers take him to the big city. And how we know what the baby's thinking is they keep cutting back and forth between the real city that the baby is seeing and scenes that he remembers from his favorite book. So you see a lot of that throughout the movie. So on that, I had to work on set for 6 months and, work pretty closely with the filmmakers because everything had to match the backgrounds and the sets, and went back to New York after 6 months and thought, that was really fun. I'll never do anything like that again. But all the guys that I'd worked with over that 6-month period went on to other movies, and they would occasionally call me to help out with something here and there, and it kind of snowballed from that.
So in a film, who hires you, the director or the prop, the set, the set decorator? How do you?
Well, typically I get hired by the prop master, sometimes by the set decorator. In that case, I was hired by the producers for Baby's Day Out, and had to fly out and meet everybody and sort of, show my credentials. Occasionally I'll be working with someone else on the crew, but most of the work I do is for the prop master. Props are anything that an actor handles in a movie. So it can be anything from, watches, glasses, rings, that kind of stuff, to books. In my case, it's mostly paper props. So it's books, documents, maps, playing cards, paintings, anything with graphics on it. I do, the technical term is graphics props, or sometimes graphic props, singular. So I don't do stuff like guns and cars and, stuff like that. It's just graphic stuff. And like you mentioned earlier, it's, the kind of stuff that people just assume they just went out and bought somewhere. or maybe the actors brought it with them in their pockets. Or whatever. But a lot of the stuff is custom made, you know. Yeah, the actors aren't responsible for bringing their own props. But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Oh no, I was gonna say I don't know if you've done anything for Law and Order TV show or any.
No, I have not. I have
Okay.
not done anything for Law and Order.
And any other? Well, I'm a fan of Law and Order, so but just before I even knew your profession existed and you existed, I was intrigued, and I'm sure you've done this, so I'm curious what how this works is, they pull out folders from a file cabinet, they look through it, and there's papers and papers, or there's a diary. So when you do a diary, let's say, and there's only, page 6 is being shown, do you fill out the whole diary so it's like authentic?
I do. That's the thing that you see on screen is called hero. That's the term they use. It's a verb. It's a noun. So the hero prop is the diary, and the hero spread is that spread that you see. Now, typically, sometimes with new people that I work with, they'll say, we just need the hero spread. We don't need anything else. It can be blank. But I always make more than they ask for, because I've been on set where actors have gone, well, wait, the rest of the book is blank. What am I supposed to do with this? There's no room for any kind of improvisation, which happens a lot. They'll be doing a scene as it's written and realize it's not working out. We need, let's try it a different way. And if the prop is, 99% blank, it really limits what they can do. So yeah, I typically make whatever it is we need on the hero spread, and then I'll do what's called a hero section, which might be 20 pages on either side of the hero spread that looks really good. And then the rest of the pages I will fill out, if it's an inch thick diary, I'll fill them out with something I've pulled from another diary I've created. So it's got words on the page, but it in no way relates to, the actual diary that the guy's supposed to be reading.
Is it just like lorem ipsum type of stuff? Just that Greeking?
I never use Greeking. No, I've created so many props over the years that I can just go back in my files. One thing that I use a lot is for a movie called, Infamous. A movie called Infamous, which was about Truman Capote and the in cold blood killings. I had to create huge amounts of Truman Capote handwriting. They wanted the entire handwritten manuscript for In Cold Blood.
So you had to do the entire manuscript?
I did not do the entire manuscript. They wanted the entire manuscript. I did about, maybe 50 pages and then repeated them. And I just thought either they're going to call me back in a rage, or they won't even check. And sure enough, they didn't even check. It's like, when you're in school and the teacher assigns you to write out something 500 times and you write it out 100 and just sort of hand it in and hope they don't.
Good. Yeah.
They're never going to count. So I did that, but the end result is I had 50 good pages of Truman Capote handwriting that I can use. I've used it over and over on as non-hero pages in all kinds of props and files, like you said, and any legal documents where there's a lot of handwriting, stuff like that. So it's come in handy, and occasionally, like if I'm supposed to be doing 3 or 4 pages of a hero diary or book or letter or something, I might create just an extra maybe 3 or 4 pages, so I get a total of 6 pages. So often that stuff will be good enough to, in the case where somebody has a lot of letters or something, I've got enough of that stuff that I can pull together, a good 100 pages of different examples of handwriting to reuse over and over and over at this point. But, originally I had to create them for stuff.
So if you do a movie that it's like from 1920s and it's a typewriter, someone's typing out, or a finished page of type that says a message that's important to the movie, and there's different brands, there's different type slightly different looks, faces on those metal keys and all that. So you have to go out and get like a typewriter from that era to make
Yeah.
an authentic document.
I do. I have about 5 typewriters here, so I can use one of the typewriters I have. Um, it depends on the show and how hero the prop is, like how close up we're going to see it. 85% of the time, we don't really know in advance. No one knows. The director doesn't even know really how much they're going to use the prop. There's a lot of decisions that are kind of made on the fly. And so unless it's really, really, locked in, that we're only going to see this thing in the background or something like that, I always assume that it's going to be used in a close-up.
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, if I'm doing a typewritten manuscript, let's say I just did a typewritten manuscript for a film, and I did one hero page that I actually did in a typewriter, and then a lot of the filler pages that I created digitally using typewriter fonts. I have some pretty good fonts that look real, and then I can do stuff like if I print, a lot of the paper that you buy nowadays is inkjet printer friendly. So the paper is treated with stuff so that when the inkjet printer prints on it, it prints really crisp. So what I'll do is I'll use some vintage paper that I pulled out of an old print shop. So I'll get some old 30, 40, 50-year-old bond paper. None of that stuff is inkjet friendly. So you run it through an inkjet printer with a typewritten font, and the inkjet printing bleeds slightly into the paper. So it creates a very authentic looking typewriter look. You can really tell the difference between a real typewriter and something that's printed on good paper out of an inkjet printer.
Mm-hmm.
But if you fool around a little bit with stuff like that, you can create a fairly good replica of the real thing using digital stuff. Because, I mean, a lot of times these things the turnaround time on the props can be hours. Days is the norm, but weeks is really rare. And I might be working on 5 or 6 things at once. So there's not a lot of time to sit there and type stuff out on a typewriter, especially since, I took typing in high school, but I'm not that good a typer.
How many words a minute did you was your time?
In high school, I did 35, but
35? Oh, that's pretty good. Well, you know.
Not great. I know people who do 90.
I'm curious about your I referenced forgery jokingly, but I mean, can you forge signatures? Like if you had to do a letter signed by Thomas Edison, can you forge Thomas Edison's signature?
Yeah, I've forged Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. And a lot of times with the handwriting, I'll have to research and get examples of the person's handwriting, real handwriting. In the case of Truman Capote, I had a researcher go to the New York Public Library where all the Truman Capote papers are and pull and photocopy all kinds of samples of his handwriting. And then I studied them. And what I typically do is I create an alphabet of caps and lowercase letters. And that's sort of my cheat sheet. I'll put that beside the piece of paper that I'm writing on, along with a couple of pages of, the person's real handwriting. And then I will just very slowly write like them. Oftentimes I'm creating new dialogue that they've never written. So it's not like you can even trace it or anything like that. You're actually having to write in that person's style of handwriting. In Truman Capote's case, he had really scattered handwriting. He would switch in mid-word, he would switch from block caps to script. And the script would, swing left and then right. It was all over the place. So, which was great because it made it, easier to replicate because it is really, really hard. When somebody one of the characters in the movie was one of the In Cold Blood killers, Perry. He was known to have beautiful handwriting. He'd, been trained in school like people were at that time. And he had beautiful handwriting. and I have terrible handwriting, so my own style of handwriting looks like, I learned it in grade 2 and then never used it, you know? And so I'm having to replicate someone's beautiful handwriting, and it's just agonizing. It's agonizing. I had to write something like 300 letters for that same film. A lot of those were from Perry. And so, yeah, it's not easy. I know there are people who can just do it really easily and quickly. I'm not one of those. It's hard work.
In your field, is there a lot of competition for the same type of work that you do, or how much you have like competitors?
I guess so. I mean, there are people whose job it is to be graphic designers who are hired on crew. They're union guys. And a lot of times I'm working on shows where they have either one guy or sometimes several guys working in the art department in the office. And they hire me as an outside guy. I'm not union. And there are prop houses, there's prop houses in New York, there's prop houses out in LA that have their own art departments. So these are, freestanding companies that create props for movies, and they're hired as outside contractors. They will have their own art departments. So there's a lot of different people all over the place doing similar stuff. But one of the things, I come from a printing background. I started out as a printer when I was a teenager, and I was working in small print shops.
Letterpress?
I was doing letterpress. Yep. I started a letterpress company with my brother. This is up in Toronto. I'm from Canada originally. And when in those days, there were no inkjet printers, no laser printers. Everybody who wanted something, multiple copies of something, had to go to a small print shop. And a lot of times people would bring in jobs and they'd need a graphic of some kind. Like, can you do a little decoration? Can you draw a picture of this, draw a picture of that? And a lot of times if you work in a print shop and you are halfway good at drawing stuff, people will say, oh yeah, we'll get the kid in the back to draw it,
Right.
And so I was a kid in the back doing the little drawings, and I kind of transitioned slowly into doing illustration work. And got completely out of printing. And it was through my illustration work many years later that I got hired to work in movies. But having that print background turned out to be really handy. And I got back into printing here in my shop right around the same time I'd worked on Baby's Day Out. I started getting back into collecting little bits of letterpress equipment, and eventually built up a whole letterpress shop, which I have downstairs. And a lot of the graphic designers who work in the movie industry do not have any print background at all. Some of them do, the really good ones do, but a lot of them don't. And it can be a bit of a handicap when you're required to produce a printed thing, A lot of these people, if it's just something they can print out on the inkjet printer in the office, they're good. But if they have to replicate a book or a map, anything more complicated, they just don't have the equipment or the wherewithal in the art department on the movie set. So that's kind of something that I have that a lot of people don't have. And plus, just the knowledge of printing history comes in handy a lot for period stuff. So I have a very wide knowledge of what fonts were in use, what technology was in use at different time periods, how newspapers were printed in the 1930s, and how that's different from how they were printed in the 1880s, and what typefaces were available for linotype machines, which were used in the printing and the newspaper industry and the book industry, as opposed to what a small printer might be using in his shop, where he would be using handset, stuff like that. There was a time no one cared about any of that. It was just like, make it look good. No one cared. But now everybody is very concerned that everything looked dead on. The directors and the prop masters and everything want to have it look exactly right. Graphics are much more important now than they used to be.
I have one obsession with in movies, and I don't know if you've ever done these when, like in the Da Vinci Code or something, it's some satanic
Yeah,
journal, and there's
right.
this crazy psychotic scribblings and designs and, diagrams. Have you ever done those? And
Oh
where
yeah,
does that, and what?
I have. Yeah, yeah.
And where does where does that come from? Where do those psychotic scribblings, how do you generate them mentally?
Well,
I mean,
yeah. That's a whole kind of subgenre of movie props, the crazy occult book. And you see a lot of movies, especially older movies, that have their version of that is what I call the bed knobs and broomsticks book. It's like it's got a crazy rolling eyeball on the cover and
yeah, right.
big stitches, and
Yeah.
it's like, where the hell did that come from? And my thing is, I always think that there's enough craziness in the real historic examples of books that you don't need to make up or add on any zaniness. So, I mean, if you look on my website, if you look in the movie props section, there's one of the things listed is a movie called Walpurgisnacht, which is German for Witch's Night. And I created a really large book for that. And the book is sort of in the storyline is sort of this evil entity. It kind of gives off this vibe of evil and horror. One of the details that's listed is that it's bound in human skin, and part of its backstory is that it was buried in a coffin with a witch. So a lot of times, one thing that people don't realize is scripts don't have a lot in the way of description. It's not the scriptwriter's job to describe everything. Any notes that are in there are really, really minimal. So when you get something like that, it's great to have a little bit in the script to build on, but a lot of times you're just trying to figure it out on your own. And you really do have to make up the backstory of the prop, especially a complicated prop like that. So in that case, I mean, the bound in human skin thing, I didn't want to do, over the top craziness, like, that just screamed, this book is bound in human skin, with a face, the
Yeah.
eye hole stitched closed or something. But I wanted to sort of hint at that. And what I did was I stretched goat skin, because I couldn't find anybody willing to volunteer.
You didn't have any old lampshades in the house?
Yeah, nothing. So I bound the book in leather, and then I stretched another piece of leather over it and tacked it to the front and back cover. So it looks like somebody tried to stretch a piece of leather that was too small, and they tacked it on with copper tacks, and it's kind of wrinkled around the tacks and stuff. And then I stained it just enough to make it look like something you didn't want to handle without gloves on. It kind of looks like they just pulled it out of the coffin with the rotting corpse. And the design of the hardcover binding is based on real 15th century books. And then all the interior stuff, all the interior pages are filled with, crazy notes and diagrams and all kinds of stuff, but they're all taken from real sources. There's a 15th century book, I believe it's, it's actually a 16th century book, late 1500s. I think it's on Rosicrucianism or something along those lines. It has tons of crazy diagrams, lots of interconnected circles and spirals with arcane symbols written, and it's real. It's all real. So I pulled tons and tons of images from actual books, and I collaged them. And I added stuff just for fun. Typically, I like to stay, true to whatever period that the book is supposed to be from. But for this book, just for fun, I collaged in elements from old radio schematics and 19th century botanical diagrams and stuff. So they're all kind of layered together. And then stuck to the pages are little scraps of paper with handwritten notes in like Latin and different real alphabets and languages, but they're just like torn scraps as if they'd been torn out of another manuscript and it was something relevant to the page and whoever it was had stuck it in. And then I put in all kinds of like pressed flowers and bird feathers and crazy stuff like that. So it's all the real stuff. But it's just how you how you put it all together, to create the vibe that the director is looking for. So it's the kind of thing where on screen, as they're turning pages, you're getting pretty good looks at all this crazy stuff, but not for long enough to go, hey, that's a schematic for an amplifier.
Diode.
Yeah. Clearly it's diode. Yeah. So, it's kind of fun. I mean, in that case, I kind of went nuts. It was a very small production. And I just, I just had a little fun with sticking in weird stuff like that, I knew no one was ever going to see. But typically I try to stay really true to whatever time period we're in, almost obsessively so.
So as we mentioned before the show started, has any criminal element ever asked you to, could you make me like a fake passport or something like that?
I have not been asked to make fake passports. I have had a couple of weird requests, and they were trying to feel me out. It was apparent that they were asking me for, something, and it was something to do with somebody needed to have something in their file or like their work history file, and it had to look like a real thing, and they sort of couched it in terms of, I lost the original, or, stuff like that. But no bearer bonds or passports or anything like that.
I lost my diploma from Harvard. Yeah.
Can
you enjoy a movie? I'm curious, can you enjoy a movie without scrutinizing somebody else's props and going,
Yeah, I do both at the same time. If having worked in movies for so long, I know a lot about how they're put together too. So I'll be looking at stuff and going, okay, well, that's a set, or that's a location, or that cutaway shot was filmed, a month later. You can tell the leaves on the trees are different, stuff like that. But typically I let myself get completely sucked into the movie, and it's only when something is really noticeable, or if it's, a paper prop like I make, I'll really kind of stop and scrutinize it for a second.
I was wondering if you could see a font, like somebody uses, some font that was created in 1930 and they're using it in a 1910.
Yeah.
Have you ever caught anyone? You've caught details.
Have you caught? Yeah.
Yeah. I stuff like that. It's just like getting punched in the face. It's really, when it's really out of its own time, it's so annoying. And especially when you're seeing movies that are supposed to be set in the 19th century and they're using digital fonts.
Yeah.
It's just like, you don't want to watch a movie with me, and lots of groaning when the paper props come out. Like, no, God. But mostly people are getting it right these days. You see less and less of that. There was a time when, the designer who was working on the crew would just sort of go, oh yeah, it looks kind of old timey, and everybody go, yeah, that looks great, But now everybody's like, are you sure these fonts are from that time period? And because everybody's been embarrassed, I think, they've been called out on their bad props. Because everybody can freeze frame stuff and scrutinize it more.
Yeah. I'm always, whenever those things are, they again, some movie, they're opening a folder on some criminal or something. I'm desperate to read, there's never enough time, but I'm trying to look and see what's really in there.
Yeah, anyway, a lot of times it's really real. It's all researched. It's all real. That's another thing I groan about, is seeing a prop that I spent 2 weeks on and it just flashes by in the background, or the file folder doesn't get opened and you've got 50 pages of heavily researched stuff. So
We're out of time. It's unbelievable. It went by so fast. So we want to say your website again?
it's ross-macdonald.com.
All right. Well,
Yeah, it's fascinating.
yeah, fascinating. And now I don't think anybody will ever see him look at a movie,
Movie the same way.
And
Yeah.
be freezing.
Sure.
Well, now with Netflix, we can freeze frame and look
Right.
at that.
Yeah, that's changed the game. Everybody can become an expert on props now.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot, Ross.